Hi, everybody. Dr. Nicholas Thomas here with the School of Hospitality Leadership at DePaul University. Recording live from the Driehaus College of Business in downtown Chicago, this is The Hospitality Spirit, a podcast designed to share and celebrate all the amazing things about hospitality and tourism. For this first episode, I'm joined by Jerrod Melman, Executive Partner with Let Us Entertain You Restaurants. For our conversation today, we covered a variety of topics, including Jerrod's career path, leadership advice for current students studying hospitality, the role of Chicago as an international food destination, and trends in the restaurant industry. I hope you enjoy our discussion. Jerrod Melman, I am so glad to have you here for the inaugural podcast of The Hospitality Spirit. The goal of this podcast is to talk to individuals who I really consider to be leaders in the hospitality and tourism industry. And the hospitality and tourism industry is such a broad industry, and there are so many different segments of it that exist. So I really love the fact that you took some time out of your busy schedule to come in here and visit today. I was hoping that we could maybe learn a little bit more about you.
Sure.
And get your perspective on what makes the food and beverage industry so great, and more specifically, really about Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is your hometown. You are a Chicago guy. You are really connected to the food scene here in Chicago. It's such an exciting segment of hospitality. I'd love to kind of get your insight and talk to you a little bit about that.
Well, I'm honored to be here, and as a DePaul graduate, it's exciting to get to come back.
That's a great segue into a little introduction of you. So
Sure.
Maybe for those of you and I have worked on a lot of projects together. We still work. You've been a great supporter of the School of Hospitality Leadership, a great supporter of the Driehaus College of Business and DePaul University as a whole. But for those of you that are in the audience that maybe haven't had a chance to interact with you, maybe talk a little bit about just yourself and who you are.
I grew up in the northern suburbs of Chicago. I grew up in Winnetka, went to New Trier, and came to DePaul. And when I went here, the restaurant and hospitality school didn't even exist yet. I studied communications here, but all throughout high school and college, I was lucky enough to get to work for my family's company, Let Us Entertain You, here in Chicago. So I spent my childhood, like a lot of people, working in restaurants. Started at about 15 working for actually a joint venture that we had with Popeye's Chicken. It was called Cajun Kitchen, and I was a cashier there. And I think from the first time I started working in restaurants, I realized that it was appealing in a lot of ways. As I was sort of working through high school and college, I realized that I didn't want to have a desk job. And I think that that was the first thing that piqued my interest about restaurants, was that you were on your feet. It was active. No 2 days were the same. But there was a camaraderie. There was certainly a team that comes out of every restaurant and came out of every restaurant that I worked at. So from the time I was a kid, this is what I had been doing, and it's what I continue to do to this day.
And it's what we try to tell a lot of our students is that food and beverage is a really great way to make an entry into hospitality. That it's not necessarily a really complicated job, but it requires consistency. It requires problem solving, critical thinking. When you first got into the hospitality industry at Cajun Kitchen, did you really have a sense of the broadness of the food and beverage industry, or because I think a lot of our students today don't realize the sheer number of opportunities that exist when somebody wants to go down that route?
Yeah, it was not where my head was at, and probably to this day, I guess I don't think about the broadness of it all that often. I tend to focus on whatever it is that I'm doing. If I'm working on a sushi restaurant, I think about sushi. So I guess it didn't really hit me at that time. You said the word consistency, and from an early age, I think I realized that consistency is an incredibly important thing in a restaurant. I mean, it's logical, right? If you are going to frequent a restaurant, I think at least something that you look for is a consistent experience, that it's reliable, that you know you're going to get the same thing. And so in learning about restaurants, I've learned that well-run restaurants have systems in place to achieve that consistency. And so for me, that was maybe my early motivation. How can I be a great cashier? How can I process orders a little bit better than the person next to me? So there was a competitive spirit as well as a team spirit that I maybe gravitated towards or that I liked, that it was always about being a little bit better. How can I be a little friendlier? How can I sell these specials a little bit more, whatever it might be.
Did you realize at the time that you were starting to develop and starting to ask yourself questions that would one day make you a great leader? I mean, that seems really the foresight that you had at that young age working at Cajun Kitchen, that still to this day, many years later, those are still the same concepts that you at Lettuce or in other hospitality organizations that we try to impart on.
I think I don't think I want to take credit for saying like, wow, at 16 or 15 years old, I had this tremendous insight that I'm building this repertoire to be a leader someday. It was a fun summer job. I liked the people. I liked earning extra money. I liked that it was always a little bit different. I liked that we were sort of part of an opening. It was a new project. But I certainly wasn't storing things away for some time later. It was I think much more playful and fun than that. You know, I think I give my dad a big amount of credit. He, I think, was someone that always made work fun, and something I remember from a very early age, and a philosophy that RJ and I brought to Hub 51 when we opened our first restaurant that we talked a lot about with our team was you have to have fun and you have to make money. And if you're doing one and not the other, it's not going to be enough after a while. And so I think I give my dad a lot of credit for always making it fun. That's really what I remember. And having probably a string of trainers. I worked with a young manager that taught me a lot, and a young trainer who's still with our company to this day that just made learning and made problem solving fun.
So I've heard you mention your father a couple times. I've heard you mention RJ.
Sure. And I should mention my sister Molly as well, who runs the training for our division.
Is Lettuce Entertain You a family business?
You know, it's certainly a company that has a lot of families working in it and for it, my family included, and countless others. You know, there's a ton of people that bring their family into our company, which is an honor. I think that people like their jobs enough to bring their family. We like to talk about being a team. You know, families are dysfunctional at times. You know, with families, there's not always clearly defined roles, where on teams there are. You know, on a baseball team, you know what the pitcher does, you know what the catcher does, you know what the center fielder does, and they all have roles to add to the success of a team. And so we talk a lot about being a team, and that being maybe a more functional model than being a family. We certainly embrace family, and we think family is a very important part of someone's, you know, psychological well-being and happiness. But I think trying to be a family is hard, and trying to be a team is maybe a little bit more clear for us.
So summer job, Cajun Kitchen.
Yeah.
Then you obviously grew up and made a transition, went to DePaul,
Yeah.
And then have kind of continued. Can you talk just a little bit briefly about your experience at DePaul
Sure.
and what that was like, and then where you went then professionally after your academics?
DePaul was it's interesting. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and I look at our college experiences, and there are three totally different experiences. Molly went to U of M, and I think was certainly the most scholarly of the three of us, and my brother went to KU on a debate scholarship. Every time I would visit a small college town, I always remember feeling like, this isn't me. I wish I sort of wanted that, but didn't want it whenever I'd get around it. I looked at Michigan State, I looked at U of I, and I just didn't gravitate towards a small college town. And so for me, the first thing I loved about DePaul was that it's in the middle of a major city, and it happened to be the city that I call home. But I think that's one of the coolest things about the restaurant school and what you guys are doing. It's such a unique, I think, leg up on the competition to be creating this hospitality school in the middle of an amazing restaurant city. The jobs and the opportunities for the kids coming here are incredible. So Chicago was the first thing that drew me to DePaul. And I just remember early on it feeling very personal. I remember, my advisors, it felt like a human conversation. I remember my first classes just feeling like I was in the right place. And by the time I was graduating, I think I was ready to be done with school and wanted to earn a living and earn money. So my time at DePaul, I wouldn't change anything about it. From very early on, I felt connected to the school, and by the time I was done, I was ready to get out there and work. So, what else can you ask for from a college experience?
Do you think your experience starting to work before college in the industry helped you a little bit adapt to college life and the work responsibility and time management?
In general, I think the sooner someone can figure out what they want to be doing, the better, which is not to say that you can't make a change later in life, but experience is about spending time doing things. And, the more experience you have anything, the better decisions you're going to make. So it wasn't premeditated, but of course, all the experience I had working in restaurants helps inform all the decisions that my brother and sister and partners and I make every day about the restaurants that we are operating.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about, for those that aren't familiar, a little bit about Lettuce Entertainment. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to spend too much time on the history and how it got started, because we have other ways to kind of convey that. But I want to get your perspective on how this company got to where it is today, and what were maybe some of the key things along the way that were that proverbial kind of fork in the road, maybe some big challenges that you see that really help define what Lettuce is today. Yeah,
I guess I'm going to point out that, of course, my opinions about Lettuce are biased, and I recognize that. But I think there were some big decisions that my dad made early on that have shaped what Lettuce has become. And I think the first one hinges on partnership. He worked for his dad and had saved up some money and wanted to buy into his dad's business. He wanted to buy into his dad's restaurant. And when his dad said no, something in him changed. And so Lettuce was founded on this idea that there were going to be partners. It wasn't just going to be my dad and his original business partner. It was going to include all sorts of talented people. And that, to me, has been the biggest determining factor in how we've grown. We grow based on the talent and the strength of the team that we have around us. If we track our growth, it's been pretty consistent without really even that being our goal. The goal has never been, okay, we need to add 5 restaurants this year. It's about creating opportunities for our young partners. And so to me, that is like the single biggest decision that has shaped what Lettuce has become and will continue to become in the future. This idea that people can earn equity in the company. People can work to a level where they own restaurants themselves alongside us.
Mm-hmm. So a partner comes in with the idea that they're going to develop one of the different concepts within Lettuce or multiple concepts within Lettuce, and that's kind of the role of the partner within the organization?
We have partners that oversee one restaurant, and they're happy doing that, and they live and breathe that concept, and that's what they want to do. And we have partners that oversee divisions of restaurants and will be responsible for multiple concepts in multiple places. So we have a little bit of everything, but the first question, if someone is a partner in one restaurant and they're wanting to do another concept, the conversation hinges on their team and how have they replaced themselves? Who do they have behind themselves? Do they have the manpower to and woman power and people power to to move forward and to do more projects. That's really where it starts with us.
Interesting. So it's grown today into 60 different concepts, give or take, 100 plus locations.
Yeah.
Chicago obviously is where it's based, and many of the outlets are here. But
about 60% of our presence is in Chicago.
Washington, D.C.,
Yep.
Las Vegas, Scottsdale.
Yep.
So locations all over the U.S. But Chicago is really the heart of it.
Yeah, Chicago is home. And that's born out of, I think, probably just laziness that we're here. This is where we live. This is where we want to be. And we've expanded to other cities that we want to spend time in, but Chicago is really the place that we like to spend most of our time.
Where would you rank Chicago in terms of a food destination in the U.S. and maybe internationally? I mean, are we a top 5 city here in Chicago?
In the world?
Oh, but to the U.S. first.
For me, it would be hard to say that we're not top 5 in the country, to say the least. I mean, if you look at New York, you got to say they have more of everything, and they have just the amount of people, the amount of density can support how many restaurants they have. Chicago, to me, is like the best hospitality town or hospitality city in the country, where not just combining food, but also service and how we take care of people. So,
why do you think that is?
Oh man, I don't know. It's have you been to New York? It's hard. It's hard to live in New York. I don't know if that beats people down after a while. It's an aggressive city. Chicago's a little bit more manageable.
It is the city of broad shoulders, as they say.
And we have a nice Midwest, I think, draw that a lot of people from around this area of the country end up in Chicago. I don't know all the reasons why I think that is, but it's just a place where people come, and I think there's a strong work ethic. I think there's a desire to be friendly, and I don't know. It's just a nice place to live for the most part.
What do you think are some of the trends that we're seeing in the food and beverage industry right now? I mean, you've got some new concepts opening up. I'm looking forward to the Sushi-san opening up. That's going to be great.
Thank you.
What are some of the trends that we're seeing in terms of what the customers are looking for and food quantity and quality? What's your insight into this industry see?
Yeah, I have to point out that my girlfriend is vegan. So one of the things that I don't think is going away, and I'm not going to say totally vegan, but healthful. I don't think healthy is going away. And I think people are wanting more real food more than ever. Whole ingredients, things that haven't been processed. So I think that the desire for healthfulness and knowing that what you're putting in your body is good, I don't think that's going anywhere. But I'll put that, and I think it's only going to increase. In terms of trends, we're living in a time when information about food and passion for food is at an all-time high. So the ability and the threshold, the margin to enter this field is lower than ever. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, you're just seeing so much more diversity of concepts and types of restaurants. Labor is at an all-time high. So concepts where you can work with fewer people rather than more, I think are faring better right now. Like I said, the ability to get into this field, it's easier than ever, and so more people are doing it. And so you're seeing, I think, more cuisines from all over the world. It's the most exciting time I can think of in this industry where there's like almost something for everyone. It's not like a time before where maybe, all restaurants were sort of a certain way.
Sure. I remember I was talking in class the other day to some students about if I think back 15, 20 years and the dining experience, I don't see there necessarily being a lot of variety in what you could get. And I think you hit it on the head. And I think that here in the U.S., I grew up on the East Coast, and maybe even here in Chicago, that there was a sense of meat and potatoes, the idea of having cuisine that's Japanese or Indian or Pakistani or different types of African cuisine it seemed very exotic, and it wasn't necessarily at the forefront of people's mind. But today, when I talk to my students, it's tonight we're going to go have sushi. Tomorrow night we're going to have Korean barbecue. Then we're going to go to dim sum this weekend, and then we're going to go have French. And then everybody loves a hamburger, so let's go get a greasy burger, and then we'll go get Mexican one night. And the willingness to try new cuisine is increased so significantly. And I think that I'd love to get your thoughts on it, and it sounds like you've kind of touched on it already, but the food and beverage industry has to realize this, and the new concepts that they're going to come up with are really going to be reflective of that diversity of palate that people have.
Completely. People's exposure is just greater. They're seeing so many more cuisines, but at the end of the day, and we boil this back, it comes down to what is craveable. And no matter what people are exposed to, they still want things that taste delicious and things that they will crave, regardless of what cuisine that is. The other thing, if we're talking about trends, to go back for a moment, the thing that you see in so many areas is sort of on-demand, that we live in an on-demand world, whether that's TV or your toiletries that you're getting from Amazon to food now. I mean, delivery has, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but just the amount of increase in delivery in our business in the last few years is interesting.
And it is, and I think you run into several issues with that. One, I think you run into just purely logistics, that in a city of millions of people and at rush hour traffic in downtown Chicago, it is really difficult to get from A to B sometimes via car. I think the second thing you run into is quality control.
Sure.
I mean, that's been one of my biggest challenges with food delivery, that the origin of food delivery is pizza and Chinese food. That was kind of it. And now with various apps that exist out there and trends, you can virtually get any type of cuisine. But quality control is so important that when you get it, some of the price points on these delivery items are as high as they are in the restaurants. And if you're paying $50, $60 for an entree and a side, you don't want to get it and have it not be at the same quality as a restaurant. So I'm really interested to see how restaurants are gonna deal with that quality control issue in this on-demand delivery environment.
It seems to me it handles itself in a couple of ways, and I don't know what your experience exactly is, but do you find that you sort of self-select things that you think will travel better?
Absolutely.
You say, oh, no, that salad kind of wasn't so great the last time, but this I know really holds up.
And what I'll do often is I will customize that order knowing that it's going to travel. So whenever you get a salad, you never get dressing on it.
Of course.
Never, any time that there is a menu item that requires a significant amount of input from the customer, like a steak preparation, I would never order a steak through a delivery service, because more than likely it's going to not be exactly how I want it. And there's so much margin there's very, very little margin for error in those sorts of things. But things that maybe I know will travel well, I have a greater tendency to do that. Things that aren't going to get greasy, things that if they get cold, it's not that big a deal to reheat them in an oven or a microwave, and it doesn't impact the quality so much. There are some things that the moment you put in a microwave, it completely changes the texture. So I think that that's a really interesting perspective, and hot items versus cold items, and so much goes into it. It's really going to be an interesting trend, because I agree with you. The quantity, the demand for these online services is just increasing exponentially. So I love to ask people this question, particularly people that work in the food and beverage industry. What's your go-to meal? That if, what's your – some people call it a death row meal. Some people call it a stranded on a deserted island meal. I mean, what's the one thing that Jerrod Melman craves that you can find here in Chicago?
It's kind of a boring answer, but there's not too many meals that go by where I'm eating something and I don't wish it was pizza. If I'm eating pizza, I'm usually pretty happy. And if I'm not eating pizza, I'm probably thinking, this is great, but I kind of wish it was pizza. So, I mean, I just crave pizza. I can burn myself out on it, but I love pizza. This is not in Chicago, but if I was like my death row meal, putting aside that I think I'd probably be too nervous to eat if I was on death row, but my last meal would probably be at Pizzeria Bianco in Phoenix. It's one of the best pizzerias in the country, and it's just, I don't know, simple and consistent, and I always crave it.
I think there are a couple food items that really bring out the passion in people and opinions.
Yeah.
Hot dogs,
Yeah.
clearly. We have a very, very specific way to eat a hot dog here in New York. Pizza is one of those. Coffee, the way that people drink their coffee or tea. Donuts.
Yeah.
But pizza is one of them. People get very, very opinionated talking about pizza. It's thin crust, deep dish, toppings, lots of toppings, no toppings. People get very heated in discussion.
And I guess what I would say is let's not argue about pizza. Let's just enjoy it.
Let's just eat it.
Yes.
I want to ask just a couple more questions before we kind of wrap up here. And you can put this in the context maybe of some of the new concepts that are opening up or maybe an existing concept. How important is the theme of a restaurant and what it looks like inside? Because I ask that because some of the restaurants that I've been to, the theme is almost part of the experience. Let's take Bub City, for example.
Sure.
When you walk into Bub City, and it's consistent, you go to Bub City in one location, it looks very similar to others, but the theme is almost the sensory experience is almost part of the whole dining story before the food even gets there.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is that to you, do you think? And what's the role of that in the restaurants?
Well, it's incredibly important. I mean, in general, the clearer we are on the story that we're telling in our own minds of a restaurant, the clearer it's going to be for the guest. And there's times when we're confused and there are times when we're really clear. Bub City is a great example. Bub City is a honky-tonk. It's meant to make you feel like you're in Nashville or you're in Texas and you're at a honky-tonk in the middle of Chicago. I guess maybe we don't use the word theme when we're talking about it, but we talk about the story. We talk about the theme. We talk about our goals for how people are going to feel. And that changes from restaurant to restaurant. You know, the feeling at Sushi-san isn't going to be the same as the feeling at Bub City, isn't going to be the same as the feeling at Hub 51. But a tremendous amount of time and effort goes into how is it going to sound? How is it going to how's the lighting going to look? How is, it going to make guys and girls look on a big night out on Friday? We want people looking and feeling their best. We eat with more than just our mouths, right? I mean, a big part of how things taste is how they look and how they smell when you get them. It's I was talking about this yesterday that we really, when we're talking about a restaurant, we talk a lot about all five senses, not just taste, though it's certainly where it starts, but really trying to make a place that people feel good is sort of self-serving.
What are some of the challenges right now? So you're getting ready to open up a new concept, Sushi-san, in River North. What are some of the challenges that you're facing right now with the opening? Is this a very standard opening for you, or is it unique in any way?
Every opening presents itself with unique challenges, and hopefully every restaurant that we've worked on before gives us some insight, teaches us about potential problems or pitfalls, and we learn from them and we can take them and apply them. But every project presents something that you hadn't seen before or you hadn't thought about before. One of the biggest problems today, and I think this is the problem of businesses for all time, is having great people, finding and training great people. And so it has been and will be a huge focus of ours, I think, as long as I can foresee, is how do you find great people to surround yourself with? And I think that's the challenge, but that's also the fun part.
And I would think that because you have such a high concentration of locations here in Chicago, that there will obviously be people at Sushi-san that are internal already to the organization that understand it and can be champions of the culture of caring and and help convey what that is.
Yeah.
But then sometimes bringing in that new
Totally.
fresh blood also helps diversify the
I think
experience.
both of them are so important, and we're very fortunate to be able to pull from our existing restaurants and bring in people that we already know and trust and can work well with to help make places successful. But people coming in and that infusion of new ideas and new energy is equally important to our success.
So one of the things that I've always found really interesting about lettuce is you look at a part of Chicago and you have a very high concentration of lettuce restaurants in let's say the River North area, but there's so much variety. Do you ever run the risk that you start to cannibalize each other with so much visibility?
Yeah,
or is
totally.
the idea that we want everyone to kind of know and be familiar with it and makes it easy to make a decision on where to go?
Yeah, I think part of it is as locations become available in our neighborhood, we sort of say, well, we could compete with ourselves or we can compete with a stranger. And so we like taking great locations, and we know that friendly internal competition is actually a good thing for us. And we hope that we're not stepping on each other's toes too much, between concepts. If we probably wouldn't open up another modern Italian restaurant right next to RPM Italian. But so we try to be cognizant of that. But no, our internal competition we view as a good thing. And people need variety. And if we're in a great neighborhood, our inclination is to do more there.
If you could thinking back to Jerrod Melman working at Cajun Kitchen as a cashier when you were that summer before you came to DePaul, and you could go back and give young Jerrod Melman a few pieces of advice, and maybe advice for students now that are thinking about going into food and beverage, thinking about going into hospitality. Maybe they're still in high school thinking about what college is going to be like. What's a couple pieces of advice you'd close with just to keep them motivated and keep them pointed in the right direction?
Yeah, I think I would tell myself to work in even more restaurants. Go back and see even more different places. I think about all the different lessons I pull from all the different leaders I worked under and all the different sort of cuisines I saw and styles of service, that the more you do, the better it's going to be. If you want to be in restaurants, work in restaurants. It doesn't matter what kind of place it is. It doesn't matter where it is. You'll learn something. And so if I could go back and tell myself one thing, I'd say work in even more different restaurants.
Jerrod, this has been really fantastic. I really have enjoyed this conversation. In the description of the podcast, you can get some more information on how to engage with Let Us Entertain You restaurants, including all their social media feeds. I look forward to sharing future podcasts with you, but for this inaugural podcast of the Spirit of Hospitality, I can't thank Jerrod Melman enough. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.